welcome back to another video feature of the Immersive Worlds Handbook. Today I'm back in Las Vegas, Nevada at Caesar's Palace, and I want to take you inside the casino and use this feature to focus on the recreation of the past and the role that the past plays in terms of theming in mini spaces, not just themed casinos like this one in Vegas. So let's go around and take a look. So throughout this feature here at Caesar's in Las Vegas, I'd like to focus on this issue of why the past is so important to us. What is it about the past, about history, about the sense of aging and time that is so significant to us that we're willing to pay so much to visit spaces such as this one? And so I'd like to look at the series of associations in this video, talk about symbols, talk about some of the material cues, and all the other things that make up a space like Caesar's Palace that convey to us a sense of a past that is very evocative to us. Okay, and I think as we'll take a look here, there's some interesting things to note about the theming just in some of the newer venues here. As we look down, we can just focus on how some of the Roman theming is continued in these columns here, but in other cases it isn't. And again, the overall place gives us the feeling, I guess, of the agora as we might associate with the times in the past. Okay, and as we continue the tour, I'll show you some of my stills, and specifically then, I think when you see the columns, when you see the statuary, when you see the various icons like this one of Caesar, we might agree that the past is quite evocative. When something is evocative, we would say that it creates in us a series of associations that connects us to other places, obviously other time periods, and certainly other feelings that give us the sense that we are somewhere different, that we are indeed in a themed or immersive space. And I would argue that Caesar's over the years has been one of the most effective themed or immersive spaces in terms of using the past to its full effect to make an impression with us. So in doing this research for Caesar's Palace, I wanted to mention the important book, Learning from Las Vegas, which was originally written in '72 and is associated with the important architectural firm Venturi, Scott, Brown and Associates, and certainly a firm that is addressed in the Immersive Worlds Handbook. So written in '72 and gives a context for Caesar's Palace, and the curious thing about it in terms of talking about history and the referencing of history in this video that I'm doing is that there's different eras of history, and even, if you will, the history that's being referred to in Caesar's Palace, if you take that as an entity, as a text, you could say that itself has changed over time. So in a sense, you have two layers of history. You have the ancient past that's being referred to in terms of the time of Caesar and Rome and so forth. And then if you take that as a line, you could, if you will, understand that at a meta level, basically, that there's the ancient history configured today when I shot this video in 2015, and then that line of ancient history of Rome and Caesar configured, in this case I'm talking about the early 70s. And you can see here, apologize for just showing the book at the screen, but you can see here that there is a lot of familiarity. Things have changed over time, but in terms of the columns that they're using here to reference ancient history, even to some extent the logos, that has been maintained. The centurions, which were more prominent in the past, and again, a lot of people would say that Caesar's Palace is really the first themed casino on the Strip. Those have gone by the wayside. I saw them a few years ago, but perhaps not unlike Treasure Island, that's considered a little too kitschy or campy. And you can see here as well, again, more, and I'll talk about statuary, but this is a pretty good image. You have the signs and the statuary, and then over here you have an Avis sign, which I think is relevant in terms of Venturi, Scott, Brown, and Eisner's study in terms of how they're trying to deconstruct the past. Now, the most curious part for me in looking back at the text was to look at this tourist brochure that they have recreated here in Learning from Las Vegas. And I just want to read this to you because later in the video I'm going to talk about how the past is construed through statuary at Caesar's Palace. And I'll just read this to you. Caesar's Palace takes pride in presenting these magnificently achieved marble statues imported from Italy and representing some of the greatest art treasures of modern man. In tribute to a Roman patron, Michelangelo once observed that the artists and sculptors created their artworks to sate their own needs and hungers, but that those who glorified the works of others by displaying these treasures were the most noble of all men, since they were perpetuating a culture for all the world. The brilliant contemporary sculptor Sir Henry Moore said, "Sculpture is an art of free space. It needs daylight, sunlight. Nature seems to be its best setting." In recognition of this, the Caesar's Palace landscaping and architecture were designed to achieve the most effective and beautiful setting for these great works of art. And then it talks about how the statues on display were carved with a certain type of marble cut from the mountain in Italy from which Michelangelo took his stone. And then they have here some of the not unlike what we see at the Venetian, some of the famous statuary that is described here and also pictured. So, you know, what's curious here then about the theming, I think, is that this referencing of the past uses, as I'll talk about in a bit, uses statuary and also makes reference to the fact of the originals and talks about how the processes that were used to create these reproductions and also to place them in the gardens in terms of landscaping architecture, those also have historical reference. So if you get a chance, you know, this is a book that's worth looking back at again and again. Very important, not just for the focus on Caesar's Palace, but also for the focus on the Las Vegas Strip. So let me get back to Caesar's specifically on the video, but I did want to share this with you briefly today. As we continue the tour here, you can see we're inside the lobby. And for me, the lobby at Caesar's is a space that clearly indicates this idea of the past as being something distinctive. In a sense, it's a form of time travel when we see images like these, when we enter these spaces and are presented with this marvelous decor that connotes so many things about the past and historical time periods, events, feelings, and the like. And by being distinctive, I think this allows us to become fully immersed in the space and to take part in what some have called the time travel of theming and immersion. You can also say that the past is something of the old and also something of the new. And I would say that a lot of the theming that we see specific to time and history and the past is not always specific. There are a few theme parks or theme spaces I can think of where they get very specific with the time periods. Caesar's is certainly not that specific, but what is key here is that they're trying to use evocative associations. And even when we see a new technology in these video screens, we're still presented with something of the old. So indeed, the old and the new are merged in many ways in forms of theming that we see at places like Caesar's. We can continue to see here that the past has certain cues associated with it. And one of the things I found quite fascinating, and I mentioned in that brief video discussion of Learning from Las Vegas, is that so much of the past at Caesar's is conveyed through statuary. And we see very few representations, realist representations, let's say, images of Caesar. We don't even see the centurions as we used to see in the past. Instead, you have this very abstract use of statuary that I think is quite effective in conveying something to the guest about the past. And again, we might say statuary is specifically used because of the fact that stone is very old and it appears to be aged to us. And in this sense, whether through statuary or other material cues, we might argue that this form of theming is all about being immersed. And being immersed, often we have to take part in time travel. And in this case, the use of the past is very evocative and allows us to feel more fully immersed in that space. As you can see here from my video, I'm leaving the casino space and entering into the wonderful forum shop spaces. I have to say that over the years, Caesar's has paid very close attention in terms of transforming the space and making it current. And of course, this sounds somewhat ironic to say that we're going to make something that is so reliant on the past current. But of course, it's very easy for a space to look too old, even though what they're trying to convey is a sense of the past. And this playfulness, I think, about time is what makes this form of theming so effective to me, so fun, and also so very entertaining. We'll continue to look at some additional video I've shot here. And you know, for years, the forum shops have been seen as those shops that have truly taken immersion into the arena of retail. And in this sense, I think we could say that the past is multi-purposed. You can see that it can be used as a form of spectacle, it can be used as a show, a form of entertainment, it can also be used to design retail spaces, it can be used to design other service spaces for eating and so forth. So definitely the past, as we see at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas, is very multifaceted and multi-purposed. And we can take a look here then and just marvel at some of the amazing design that we note at Caesar's. And as I said earlier, I think that over the years, Caesar's has paid close attention to the fact that they need to constantly update their spaces. And I was just reading that the Forum Shops has undergone a major transformation. And I noted in the literature discussing this that they were talking about how they've done two things. They've made it easier for the guest to get to one space to the next, and they've retained that sense of opulence, that distinctiveness that you likely associate with this kind of historical theming. And so we've had this opportunity today to look at how the past is used, I think, very successfully here at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas. And hopefully you'll have the chance to visit the many spaces of Caesar's and to also marvel in the many ways in which the past is utilized to full effect to create theming and immersion for the guest. I hope you enjoyed this video feature today here at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas, and please come back for additional video features of the Immersive World's Handbook.